So the hybrid event it's going to be virtual as we did last year, but also we have our walks committee planning a walk with me. So if you have your teams and you want to walk in small groups, there will be a plan for you to do that. So a hybrid event, but more to come. We do have the walks webpage up and running, and we will provide that link in the chat. We're very excited. It just went up today. And then the other thing I did want to mention is, this annual walks is annually, and this is the second year that we are doing it solely as an affiliate. But throughout the year, I mean, we need ongoing financial support. It's not that we look forward to October and that whole fundraising event, but fundraising and bringing in financial support to the affiliate is an ongoing event. And so I ask for your support, and you can support us by donating a one-time donation or doing a monthly donation, and also signing up as member. We're less than 200 members, and we want to double that, triple that, because as we have more members, we have a greater voice at the national level. So I really encourage that you click on that donation link, click on that membership link, because we really do need your support. And we will not be able to provide these free programs, have these general meetings without that support. So I'm going to turn it over to our illustrious moderator, Carrie Dubois, who's also a board member. So take it away, Carrie.
Thanks, Twyla. And I want to welcome everybody again. Thank you for joining us on this Thursday evening. At our last general meeting, I said I had my herb tea, which keeps me calm. I hope you have your warm beverage as well as we settle in. This is a big month for mental health. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, as you know, and we thought we would start this meeting with my favorite video. It's very short, but it just sort of sets the tone for how we want to think about people living with mental illness. So, Christina, go ahead and play it. Very short. I could see it. I couldn't see it with my boxes in the way. But anyway, I think it's very cute. So I am excited to introduce our speaker tonight, Ingrid Peterson. And I reached out to a friend who's here tonight, Charlene Margot. Charlene does a lot of community events in our area. She runs the Parent Project, which is a parent education program, and thousands of people attend. So our NAMI board decided that we really wanted a speaker with lived experiences for Mental Health Month. And when I reached out to Charlene, Charlene connected me to Ingrid. And I'm now so grateful to know Ingrid and getting to know her as we prepared for this meeting. So as I mentioned, Ingrid does have lived experiences. She also had a brother with serious mental health issues, and he was resistant to treatment. So she has both had her struggles with mental illness, and she also has that family perspective as well. So Ingrid, we're so grateful for your time. We're grateful you're here from Hawaii. So I will turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. And I've known, I'll just add this right now, I've known Charlene since we were freshmen together in college, and she witnessed and helped me with my very first episode of depression. At least the first time I knew to call it depression. There may have been a little bit of an episode before after being sick, but I didn't know what it was really. Anyway, I am 66 years old, and I've had recurrent depressions from the time I was 18 until about 10 years ago. I've reached a healthy frame of mind, but I've sure learned a lot along the way. I'm a little bit nervous. You can see I'm reading, but I'm a little bit nervous about sharing my journey. But I'm sharing what I've experienced and learned in hopes that I can help others. I want you and your loved ones to know that you can reach out and get help and even learn ways to maintain emotional wellness. If I can do it, you can. So also, I agree with NAMI about the importance of being more open about mental illness and mood disorders to both reduce their stigma and also to help others feel less alone. I've found that once you start talking to others about your own emotional challenges or those in your family, you'll find that other people's or their family members have also struggled with similar problems. It is just so common. And when you share, I think you feel less alone, you feel less different, you feel more supported, like any sort of support group. So over the years, the many years, I've come to recognize my own pattern of spiraling down into depression. Like many people, I think it's extremely common for anxiety to lead into depression. When my life feels too stressful, I have a tendency to get anxious. The anxiety often impairs my functioning, which then of course creates more anxiety. And then I often get to feeling overwhelmed and very down, full of self-critical thoughts, negativity. And then I'd get stuck in a dark hole of depression that sometimes became very, very hard to climb out from. I tended to want to escape from these bad feelings rather than try to do something about them. I used to isolate myself as much as possible when I was depressed, not wanting to reveal or discuss my negative state of mind with others. I'd feel ashamed of my weaknesses. Why couldn't I get out of it? As much as I could, I would crawl into bed and stay there, reading novels to escape the stress of anxiety and negative thoughts. I would get paralyzed and sometimes feel hopeless. At my very worst point, when I was about 30, I was sitting cross-legged on the floor, completely bent over with my head to the ground, sobbing my heart out. And then I just felt intensely that I wanted to die. I just felt like I couldn't take feeling like that anymore. But almost right away, I realized that I couldn't do that because I couldn't do that to my family. I had a very close friend whose older teenage brother killed himself. And she had shared with me how utterly devastating that was to the family. I think maybe it led to a divorce. And anyway, just wounds that lasted so long. And so I didn't. That just stopped the suicidal train of thought. What it did do, this suicidal moment broke through my resistance to taking medication for my depression. I was already seeing a really wonderful counselor, and she had been urging me to try medication because the counseling had helped a lot, but I needed more. But I had grown up in the late 60s and early 70s. I tell my high school students I was like a high school hippie. And I was just wanting to be natural. And I had repeatedly rejected the idea of taking medication. It was only with this suicidal feeling episode that I was able to, out of desperation, finally try adding medication to my therapy. With counseling and medication, I was able to emerge from that dark episode of depression. But like I said, I've had recurrent depression for decades, but not the last 10 years. Knock on wood. Sometimes the support of talking regularly to a counselor has been enough to help me out of depression. But usually when I've gotten depressed enough to seek out a counselor again, I found that I've needed the help of antidepressant medicine as well. People, I don't know if younger people know how lucky they are today, and that the people are so fortunate because the various SSRI, serotonin, something reuptake inhibitors, I don't know. The various SSRI antidepressant medications that have either no or very few side effects, they're available now. The first time I took an antidepressant was before Prozac came out in 1986. And Prozac was the first of these antidepressants. I hope someone won a Nobel Prize, I don't know. And I had to put up with very dry mouth, which was, it was just difficult for the medicine I took, which I think was called a tricyclic. So today, I think it's much easier. And now there's a whole family of similar, I don't know all the newest ones, but I know there's a whole family of medicines similar to Prozac. One, Zoloft, I tried once when I was wanting to start it again, and I'd heard it took effect more quickly. But somehow, you know, everybody's body chemistry is different, and somehow that one made me feel nauseous. So I've stayed with my tried and true Prozac, and that's what worked for me. Everybody, of course, is different. Then when I became depressed again after Prozac became available, I started seeing a counselor and taking Prozac. I don't remember the exact timeline of that. And the finding that both helped me, but then I quit taking it after I'd been feeling better for quite a while, for months. And I actually took it for a year. Back then there was this theory that, maybe it was the late 80s, I don't know. There was a theory that if you took Prozac or I don't know if other medications like it were out then, but if you took Prozac for 1 year, that it would like readjust your brain chemistry and you wouldn't have to take it again. You'd just like be better. And since then that's turned out, at least in general, not to be true. So years later, I was depressed again. I told you I had recurrent depression. And this was while I was breastfeeding my son. And of course, I didn't want to take Prozac then. So I tried a natural remedy that works for some people called St. John's wort. I think it was often used in Europe, but it happened to not help me at all. And I just somehow muddled through that period with other types of self-help. And finally, I was depressed enough again and no longer breastfeeding. And anyway, I was depressed enough again that I sought professional help once again, because I wanted my son to be affected as little as possible by having a mother with a depressed mood. And my background was, I mean, in college, I majored in psychology and especially focused on developmental psychology. And at Stanford, I worked at Stanford's demonstration kind of lab school. And I mean, if anyone, and I taught preschool for the first 8 years after I finished college because I loved it so much and I was very idealistic. And if anyone would know, I knew this was not good for my son. So that was, you know, that was very difficult, very difficult. And so I never let myself slip down so far once I was a mother. I mean, I think that was a motivation to to help myself and take steps to get better, because I just knew it'd be harmful for my son, even when he was very, very tiny. Kids, as probably you all know, pick up on your moods. And so in a way, maybe that helped being a mother. And I made me maybe feel more guilty, but it also motivated me to get over my resistance and get help. And you just can't stay in bed all the time when you're a mom. So I've been taking a low dose of Prozac continuously for, did I skip the page? Nope. I've been taking a low dose of Prozac continuously. I figured it out for 22 years now. My doctors and I have decided that I avoid depression much better by staying on a low dose of Prozac, even while I don't feel depressed at all. It just makes my brain function in a more healthy manner. So I think I would say that it just helps me keep feeling more like myself. I don't get off my true self. I stay with the self I really am. I do. So basically, I plan to stay on it the rest of my life, and that's with my doctor's blessings. And of course, you know, everyone makes their own decision, but that's what's worked for me. So close friends and family have been a really important support for me, as for most people. But I found it valuable to talk to a counselor, someone outside my family or close friends, instead, when I got really stuck in depression. What I found family members and friends to be most important when I was in that state was in encouraging me to get the professional help I needed. And sometimes I took a lot of encouraging because I was resistant, both in dealing with the process of getting help, which isn't always so easy, and the process of finding a counselor to begin with. And then also I was often resistant to, I'd be living in a different place. And I was sort of resistant to the process of starting from scratch with a new person, explaining myself to them. It felt like too much work. I mean, when you're depressed, everything feels really difficult. Anyway, I really recommend if you're really having a hard time, or if someone in your family is really having a hard time, that talking to a professional counselor of some sort is the most helpful, at least for me. Where was I? I was saying when you talk to somebody who's not part of your close web of relationships, I think part of the reason it can be more valuable is that your family and your close friends, they're hurting to see you feel bad, and so they get more emotionally entangled in a way that sometimes isn't helpful, maybe. And I mean, they're wonderful support, but sometimes also I found that people who love me get really frustrated because they just feel like you're being resistant to change. And if they haven't experienced depression themselves, then of course some people just feel like, oh, snap out of it, or go get help, or they can feel frustrated. Anyway, so I have found wonderful counselors. And one thing I do recommend is, if the first counselor you or your family member finds does not work out for you, if you don't like them, don't wait too long, get a different one. I think, yes, it can feel difficult to have to go search out a different counselor, even if it's in the same place. Like I have Kaiser coverage, say, but it's really worth it. And I think you'll know pretty soon if that person is going to work for you, is going to be helpful. And I mean, because you click, you feel their empathy. And anyway, I think just you'll know. And then when you find someone who's right for you, who's able to help you, you'll end up really appreciating their support and insight. At least I always did. Once I found a counselor I liked, I'd usually continue seeing her after I was feeling better in order to support my healthy path I'd gotten on and to deal with stressors that I was still confronting in my life, because, you know, who doesn't have stressors in their life? We all do, some more than others. So the counselors helped me understand and accept myself, you know, love myself in spite of my faults. But I'll mostly understand myself, my feelings, my triggers, what things triggered me into anxiety and depression, and my patterns. And then that way you can try to nip them in the bud sort of before they get worse. Counselors have helped me brainstorm ways to deal with my stressors of the moment, like practical things that are going on, you know, what choices, what steps I might want to take. And most importantly, in the long run, I think counselors have helped me learn ways to get help and to help myself when I'm in danger of slipping into depression or have already landed there. I've discovered what works for me at different levels of distress, and what helps me to keep emotionally healthy and not let stressors and anxieties lead me into depression. So it's been, you know, a long journey, but I really think I've learned a lot. Probably also some through books, but I think that's just an extra addition. I think you really need to talk to a person to get help. Besides, this is a little more cheerful here. Besides taking advantage of professional help, various activities, lifestyle choices, kinds of self-awareness, and what I call self-talk have helped me support a positive frame of mind in a happier life. So relaxation exercises of various kinds are very helpful for me, as is traditional meditation when I'm disciplined enough to do it. I especially loved a deep relaxation tape that a counselor made for me. She used sensory imagery of a favorite place of mine where I feel at peace. And I used that tape for many years, but I don't know what it is now, but I remember it. I think of it. And later I used similar imagery to help me through the pain of childbirth. I find, I think as many do, that being outdoors in nature is both relaxing and restorative. It just uplifts my mood, I think inevitably, even if just for the moment, that's important. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be in the middle of a forest, or you could just have a couple of trees or a bird or two. I just think being out in nature is very therapeutic. Exercise. I think everyone knows that exercise is really helpful for lifting one's mood, for depression, anxiety, and so on. But I think it's important to remember, even if you don't feel up to heavy duty exercise, just a simple walk is wonderfully helpful. At least it is for me. I've gone through periods of time when I ran a lot, or I swam every day, or walked for miles, but even just a little bit of exercise, I think is immensely helpful. And I like to I don't go to gyms. I never have, actually, except for in schools. I like to exercise outdoors in nature, and there I just like that. And there I actually am getting the benefits of both exercise and nature. So that's my favorite. Gardening. I've always found working in the garden to be very therapeutic, because I just love to care for plants, to tend them. And you may think it's strange, but I even find pulling weeds, digging weeds out, as meditative. It's and gardening, of course, combines both nature and being active outside. You're moving around. When I've been very anxious or stuck in bed depressed, I found actually that any little simple physical activity, such as getting up and doing the dishes, can be helpful in breaking the spell of negative feelings and paralysis. So there's an action I've taken, or an act I've taken, that might not be right for everyone. I don't know how it goes over in the Bay Area, where I've also lived for many years, especially the Silicon Valley sort of territory. But where, you know, it seems like most people are trying to be very high achieving, and they want their children to be high achieving and be very successful as well as happy. But for me, I've chosen to make my work life less demanding. It's really just a realistic choice. Less demanding than it might have been given my background and theoretical abilities, at least. Just in order to reduce the stress I have to deal with on top of other stresses in my life. And I just know myself, I know my limits, and I've just chosen emotional wellness over traditional success. And that's worked well for me. I'm always on a tight budget, but it's the right choice for me. If I do become aware of myself slipping into anxiety, a down mood, self-criticism, pessimism, or all or nothing thinking, you know, like it's either all good or all bad, or catastrophic thinking, like if I don't do this, just something horrible is going to happen. I find that supportive self-talk is very helpful to prevent escalating those thoughts and to steer my mindset in a more positive direction. I remind myself not to be too hard on myself, to be kind to myself, to be my own best friend. Would I treat my best friend so harshly as I do when I'm criticizing myself and thinking I'm no good and I'm hopeless and comparing myself to everyone else? And of course I wouldn't. So if things feel very hard and I'm feeling stuck and overwhelmed, I can ask myself, I've literally done this. I can remember, I could just visualize doing this. And this was in Hawaii where I was really depressed. So I don't think Hawaii is a cure-all. I can ask myself, what can I do in this moment to help myself? And then I remind myself that taking baby steps is just fine. My mantra becomes one step at a time. I even had a mug that I used at school. I'd share it with the kids. It actually had an elephant on one side. It was from World Market. And the other side said, one step at a time. And that's, I don't think, just for emotional problems. I think it's just good for life in general. And in special ed, we all often talk about chunking things. If something seems insurmountable to a student, you chunk it, you give them little bits at a time. So if I'm feeling more self-talk, if I'm feeling blue, I remind myself that a down mood can be just a passing feeling. A bad day can be just that one day. I don't need to let it spiral me downwards, as it sometimes did in the past. And that, as Scarlett O'Hara so famously said, tomorrow is another day. Sometimes I say, just give up on that day and start again tomorrow. Especially if I'm prone to get a headache. So if I'm getting a headache and I just feel awful, and just give up. Just give up for the day. You know, this is afternoon or evening, and tomorrow I'll start again. Don't have to make a big production out of it. So probably the most important truth I can remind myself of is that even a deep depression is not permanent. I will come out of it, as I have before. And these and I guess I should add that I think that's particularly important for teenagers and young adults who don't have the experience I have. And I've talked to teens I've worked with, and they sometimes just feel it's catastrophic and nothing is going to get better. And it's just so important to assure them that there are ways out. You will come out. It's not the end of the world, and we don't want them to make it the end of the world, of course. Now, this self-talk I do, these are truths, but they might sound very trite to you. Some of them sound like slogans from self-help books, but I found self-talk to be extremely helpful for me. And it goes along with awareness, catching myself, being aware of my thinking getting into a negative pattern. And before that gets worse, talk to myself and steer myself more positively. Let's see, what else do I have here? Now, I haven't mentioned NAMI, but that's only because I didn't know about it when I was deeply depressed. I only became aware of it about 5 years ago. And I heard about it in my little community. I was living in Southern California and a little place called Topanga Canyon. And we'd share events a lot about what was going on in the community. And I saw advertised these NAMI support groups that were at our local library just 5 minutes away from my house. And so there was a huge amount of stress with my brother, and I was thinking maybe I would find it helpful. But still, it took me a couple years, life is busy and so on. But a few years ago, I was just toying with the idea. And then a few years ago, I started going almost, I think it was weekly. It was either every 2 weeks or it might have been weekly to the local support group, just in order to explore and deal with my very mixed emotions. I would actually even call them, we've gotten to love-hate, because the hate only because he was mistreating my parents when they were old and ill. And anyway, I had very stressful mixed emotions about my mentally ill brother. He had caused untold grief to my parents, my siblings, and myself, and yet I still loved him. He was just 2 years younger than I, and we grew up together, squabbling, but very close. It was a 30-year tragedy, basically. He had refused to get any help for decades. He denied that he had any emotional problems. The support group helped me, and I also helped others there by sharing what my mother and my whole family had gone through for so long. And sometimes encouraging, it was often mothers to be strong in what they were doing, sometimes setting limits with their young adult children, because I would share what a toll it took on my mother's life. Her close friend, who's a psychologist, actually thinks she probably would have lived decades longer, like all the other women in her family, if she hadn't been under such intense stress with my brother, who was living at home. Anyway, still dealing with my feelings about my brother and trying to understand better. I soon decided to attend a 12-week, you probably have it in San Mateo County, a 12-week NAMI family-to-family class, where I learned more about my brother's very difficult to treat condition. It wasn't simple depression, and ways I might better communicate with him as someone who was in denial of their emotional problems. Because that was very difficult. And I learned a great deal. And it was wonderful also having that group. It was not only a class where we learned a lot, but we also were really a support group. We were parents, siblings, and even children of family members struggling with mental illness. And it was just a wonderful program. near the end of this series of classes, a few of the young people, I mean, like young adults from the NAMI peer, or NAMI, I don't know how you say it, the NAMI peer-to-peer programs, they came and they spoke to us about their paths to greater health and happiness. And that was really inspiring and wonderful to hear. I also attended many very informative NAMI speaker series talks that were given. We were part of the West LA branch. And I think one of them was a bit like this one. Others had, various experts. They were just great. So I went on to share information about NAMI, these resources, with my the school psychologist at my middle and high school, where I'd worked for many years. And also with the director of the wellness center that had recently opened. We had an on-campus Boys and Girls Club, which was really quite wonderful. Had a lot of supportive programs, but they added this wellness center. And they both went on to recommend these NAMI resources to students and their families, who seem to need it. I just think the world of NAMI, and I recommend its programs to everyone who sound like they might be interested or might need it. I think it's across the nation in every state. I haven't looked it up here, but I know it's here somewhere close by if I needed it. I don't know how long I've talked. So these days, I'm at peace. I'm in good spirits. I'm thriving. My various worries don't escalate out of control. And I just naturally choose to make sure that activities that support my emotional wellness are part of my daily life. The ways I found to support emotional wellness have become just a natural part of my reaction and ways of thriving in life. I still, very much it's still family, close friends and family, people who I know love me no matter what, right? Unconditional love. Those people are always so important. And all you need really is one person like that. I can't guarantee, I can't definitely say I will never get seriously depressed again, but I doubt it, but you never know. But it's very good to know I don't need to be afraid of that. I know there are ways out and ways to get extra help if I need it. I have tools. That makes me feel strong. So that's what I have to share. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Ingrid. Thank you for sharing your story of hope. So
thank you. I've never done this before. I've only done it on a one-to-one basis. So I've never
it's great.
Public talk before.
You just can't hear the clapping on Zoom. That's the only problem.
I see it.
We do have some time for questions. If you put a question in the chat, it will come directly to me and I will moderate some questions. And please stay. I hope you still have your warm beverage. After we do a few questions, we also have a short inspirational speaker at the very end of our meeting. I wanted to say before, yeah.
So I've made you host.
Okay.
So that the attendees can send their questions or comments directly to you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Twyla. Before I go to questions, Ingrid, I just had to share when you were talking about the garden and nature and walking. It's so true. It's so restorative. Last night, I've been sharing with my friends today. Last night, I was at a meeting until after 1 a.m. Started at 4 and it ended at 1:15, in the morning, which I've never had a meeting that goes that late. And I was just exhausted. So I walked at Filoli by myself, right? And there aren't as many flowers right now, but there are a few. And, I feel fine. I'm not even tired. It restored me. So it is so true. And to be able to live in Hawaii, that must really help.
And I'm half a block from the beautiful beach I can walk on. Oh, I
Yeah.
forgot one thing. Charlene will remember. We used to talk about, in college, we used to talk about water therapy. Now, I know not everybody has a pool or an ocean, but even just getting in the shower, um, to, to me can be very therapeutic.
Yeah, or a bubble bath.
But or bath, yeah.
That's what I do. I do hot bubble bath. All right, so we do have some questions. First question, and we also have some parents in the meeting tonight. And so I think parents are often curious, especially dealing with adolescents, right? You don't know whether it's a serious mood disorder or whether it's normal adolescent mood swings. And the question for you is, when did you know it wasn't just normal sadness and moodiness, that it might be something a little bit more serious? Were you young, an adolescent? When did you know?
Well, when I didn't know was my senior year in high school when I had a bad case of the flu. And then I just sort of kept lingering in bed, I think. And I have a feeling my mother was behind this. That the dean at my school finally called me up and said, Ingrid, are you going to come back? And I was like a top student. It wasn't academics. And I think my mother prompted my boyfriend of many years and his best friend, our close friends, to come over and kind of talk to me. And I guess, I don't know, maybe I got embarrassed. But I didn't identify that as depression. It was only in hindsight I realized that was probably my first episode of depression. And it's extreme. I just know from reading and from NAMI that it's extremely common for mood disorders and other kinds of mental illness too to start in the late teens or early 20s. And that's what happened with my brother too. We could look back, and he first started being in some turmoil when he was, I don't know, he was either a junior or a senior in high school. But when I first knew I was depressed, and I guess maybe my roommate here, Charlene, will remember, I guess we labeled it depression. We must have, was when I was in college, and I, shared a double room with Charlene Marco. And we were really close. We hit it off from the first day we were together. But I started, Charlene remembers some of it. I don't remember that well, but Charlene remembers I was sitting on my bed facing the wall, and that I just really stopped talking. And I just was very, very depressed and getting to be very dysfunctional. So I think it was pretty obvious, but I credit Charlene and another friend in our dorm, maybe someone in my family too, I don't really remember, in coaxing me, encouraging me, maybe giving me a kick in the butt, I don't know, to go to the student counseling center on campus at Stanford called The Bridge, which I believe is still there. And that was really scary for me. And so I think at that point we must have labeled it depression. So, and I didn't take medication. I don't even know if I went and talked to them more than once, but somehow out of that, I decided to, anyway, maybe that's enough detail, or do you want me to go on?
That's good.
What I did. That's good. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Because I just have another question that's good that just came through on the chat. Was there a particular trigger to your first episode of depression? And can you share a little more about your brother's condition and how he dealt with it, or how he didn't deal with it?
Yeah, those are kind of two separate things. But I had a range of triggers over time. And one of them I recognize would be when being sick or injured, or once, I don't know if I got depressed when I had foot surgery and I had to spend the whole summer in bed, but being sort of sick and bedridden or in pain, I have some foot problems. That was sometimes a trigger. So that very first time when I was a senior in high school, it might have been partly that I was sick and in bed, and chemically it affects your body when you're just, I mean, for me, exercise is so helpful. Also, probably, I don't know, I was such a top student academically, but I think probably then you're like applying to colleges. I wasn't really worried about getting into college, but I think that my life was going to change may have influenced me some. It might have been some anxiety over leaving my extremely happy high school life and going to college. I don't remember that well, but at Stanford, I mean, I never, everyone's different, but for me, academics was always easy the time I was in kindergarten or whatever. It was never academics or my work that triggered my depression. Those things only became a problem when I became depressed and then became less functional. And so then things pile up and it feels overwhelming. But I think that time, I'm just going to sound like I'm spoiled maybe, but I just had a hard time adjusting to a different life in college. It was partly because I was very, very happy in high school in Hawaii. Had a long-term boyfriend from 9th grade on, and I had a huge amount of freedom because our parents really trusted us to be responsible. So actually going to college on the mainland where it was cold and I kept getting sick, living in a dorm to me was more regimented and less freedom. A lot of people would think that's more freedom because their parents have been telling them what to do. But for me, it was like more regimented, and I was commuting to Berkeley on every other weekend because my boyfriend was there. We stayed together for a long time, and I don't know, it was urban. Those dorms were really depressing. I don't know. I just became depressed and then less functional. And then part of solving that was dropping 2 classes and going home to my family for spring break. And somehow I came back to college and I was very happy after that. And I was just thinking today, Charlene, that spring quarter, we took this marvelous class called conditioning. I don't even know how we often took classes together. I don't even know how we came to choose it, but what a perfect class for mental health. It was taught by this really upbeat woman and we ran around in nature. She taught us meditation, relaxation, self-massage, like massaging your face. And I bet that really helped support my happier mood too. Other triggers have often been, I have to confess, adult relationships, my love life or my marriage. Those are the things that have triggered me into depression. But you know, some students find, well, they often have difficulty with a breakup, but some students find, you know, academics and academic pressure are what are their triggers. Everybody's triggers are different. And that's probably enough about that. And my brother, see, still I have to like kind of clutch up. It was so stressful for like, it was a 30-year tragedy. He died 2 years ago and it really is a blessing because he's at peace now. And he would never get help and he was just getting worse and more unhappy and angrier. And so he's like, my girlfriend who's known him since he was in kindergarten says he's out there surfing some wave now. Anyway, he didn't kill himself. He had some really fast acting painless cancer and he was gone in 5 days. So we didn't know what he had for a long time. He first had a lot of trouble when he was about 30 and his live-in girlfriend broke up with him. But he'd been having problems before that. Like I said, in high school, he did one thing, oh, I should have done the other thing, and And then he took 10 years to graduate from college because he kept dropping out. And like everyone in our family, he was really smart. That wasn't the problem. But when he started to really have serious problems when he was about 30 and his girlfriend had broken up with him, he actually felt suicidal. And I, who'd already been to counseling before, and I'd already taken antidepressants before. I'm trying to remember this. Yeah. I actually drove him to like an emergency. It was through Kaiser here in Hawaii. I drove him to like an emergency appointment encouraged him to get help and drove him to an appointment. But he ended up, so he started out being really depressed, but it ended up not being simple depression for a while. And he would never stick with any kind of therapy, or he was very resistant to medicine. I'll get into that more later. So we never really had a diagnosis, though. We were always trying to seek help even without him. And sometimes they thought he might have bipolar 2. But in the end, my sister especially sought a lot of help as my parents were more out of the picture in various ways. My mom had dementia and she passed away. But the thought is that he had something, I don't know if people are aware of it, called borderline personality disorder. And it doesn't mean you're just a little bit mentally ill. It's not that kind of borderline, but it's one of the most difficult to treat. It's like manic depressive, bipolar, you could take lithium or this or that, but it's very, very difficult to treat. And he also had very strong obsessive compulsive disorder focused on his food and digestion. And that really got into the way because he was with his resistance to trying medication, either antidepressants or sometimes other things were suggested to him. He would maybe take a quarter pill, something that shouldn't take any effect for a week or a month or something. And he'd say he was like a hypochondriac. He would say he was having all these side effects, so he couldn't take it. So anyway, that was him. And it was very, very difficult, especially when my mom had dementia and my dad was physically disabled. It was just a toxic situation, and we ended up, my mom would never kick him out. I used to think maybe she should have done tough love, and you can only live at home if you get some sort of mental health help. But she didn't, and I can't really judge. And what we ended up doing is evacuating my parents away from my brother. We left my brother in the family home, not knowing if he might burn it down. And we found them a wonderful assisted living 5 minutes from my sister in Berkeley. And they actually my mother actually got a lot better for a while. And she forgot that my brother was a problem. That was a blessing. She knew he existed. There was the picture of the whole family. But that was a blessing. So her last months, she actually had ovarian cancer. But I was with her and saw her through the whole process. And she wasn't in pain, but she had dementia. And she'd be laughing, but she had, it was as good as it could be in those last 4 months, with my parents holding hands and my mom finding joy in her wedding pictures every day because they were brand new every day. And my brother continued on here. So.
Oh. Well, thank you for sharing that. But that is a lot of family stress. Wow.
Oh, immense.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Immense. So my next question is about stigma. Of course, we're all working on stigma. And those of us that are heavily involved with NAMI. But stigma is so troubling. Like what we often say, when somebody's suffering from a mental illness, the neighbors don't come over and bring over a casserole when somebody's in treatment, right? Some of us have family members with dual diagnosis, and when they're in and out of rehab, it's almost like everyone goes silent. They don't know what to say. So did your family experience that as well, where there was just sort of that silence and people don't have the words? Or with your brother, and even with you, did you feel like people didn't want to ask, didn't want to check in with you?
No, if I wasn't isolating myself too much, my closest friends were usually, well, partly long distance and partly in the neighborhood. No, if anybody was isolating, it was on my side because I would feel ashamed and like, I don't want to bring down their mood and be a burden. But so in that case, my family members were pretty close, and so they would always be checking on me. And when I did talk to my friends, I'd end up spilling out the truth. I didn't feel stigma there in my work. If I weren't retired right now, I wouldn't be doing this. In my work, I have very, very close friends there. I was working in special ed. And with my closest friends who I knew wouldn't blab, I would actually share with them my issues, my recurrent issues with depression and anxiety. And I actually reached out and helped various ones. One who actually, after her husband died, she drove off a cliff. And anyway, I've helped people, encouraged them and said, I'll drive you there to go get help. But I wouldn't want the authorities at work to know, because I would feel like it could be detrimental, or the parents would think badly of me. I wasn't really supposed to, because in special ed, then the district could be liable for therapy or something. But sometimes when I was very close to teenagers who are really very, very troubled, one girl I'm thinking of especially was cutting herself and stuff, not only would I get them help at school with a school psychologist or other resources through school, but I would share with them. I'd say this is very private, but I would share with them that I had experienced depression too. And I'm almost getting tears in my eyes. And I would just say, you just have to know you can get through this. You can get help. It's really worth getting help. And don't just think this is impossible and this is the end of the world. So I would do that even though I really wasn't supposed to. And they didn't blab. I'm pretty open to friends, and with close friends, once we started talking, I would tell them. And I didn't feel like they avoided me. In fact, they were very supportive, and they was like, if you ever need anything, I'm there for you. And I remember my one girlfriend saying, hey, you can call anytime. You can call at 3 a.m. You call me. So it was just my concern about my professional life that I worried about stigma. And with my brother, it was so devastating to everybody and so upsetting to me. It used to be my friends would say, oh, how's your brother? And I would just go, I would just get so stressed out by being asked. What was I going to say? See, it stressed it out of my mind. I didn't blab to everybody, but we sort of walked a fine line, because in some ways, like at some point, we kind of hoped my brother might get some work again. After he was in grad school, he once did some research work. He was brilliant, but he basically didn't function. And so you don't really want it to go around that he's having these emotional problems, because you don't want to, especially Hawaii is a really small place. Everybody knows each other, as Twyla knows. So we would give him some privacy that way, because I think there still is, professionally, there still can be stigma. But also, when my sister was working in the most recent years with trying to, and she worked very closely with his doctor. My brother gave permission for my sister to talk to his doctor, who was really marvelous. He ended up actually getting kicked out of our neighborhood for good reason. They were going to do some lawsuit, and our neighbors are wonderful. I'm living here now in the family home. There were plenty good reasons. And so they needed to find a place for him to stay, in a care home. And you had to draw a line where if you talk too much about how troubled he is, people aren't going to want to accept them into their care home. And as it was, in fact, he found a wonderful place. The guy who ran it was nearby in our town, and the guy who ran it was an engineer, so also very intelligent, and was going to garden with him or go biking with him. And he seemed happy about it, but within a week, his behavior was so out of bounds, they had to give the 2-month notice. And then he was in another place that wasn't quite as nice, and that was heading to giving him notice too. And so he was heading to living in his car. So there are but in the broader sense, I very much believe in talking up when there aren't those sort of issues that you have to be careful about. I'm very much into talking about it. And when I talk to everyone around anyone in Hawaii here now, I just say, well, my brother was mentally ill, you know. And I make a point of talking about my history of problems, not only once other people bring it up. Or sometimes I was just thinking the other night, walking on the beach, talking to my neighbor, I can't even remember why I brought it up. She was so interested. And I realized it was because of her adult son who'd been living next door for a while. But we have to continue that conversation. So I do think there's a lot less stigma now. And I'm working to help it continue that way. And in my community in California, there was somebody else who was part of NAMI too, had gone to NAMI too. We tried to, in our like next door social media, another like a Facebook group for just our little canyon, we try to bring it up at different times and publicize events.
Right, thank you for that. I think we'll do one more question that came through the chat. And then again, don't leave everybody because we have a closing speaker. So our last question, how did you find a good counselor? Did you look for certain training or was it just how it felt for you? Any tips?
Well, a good counselor. Well, my first, well, on campus, I went to the campus center where that was just grief. And I think colleges have I know colleges have much better mental health wellness programs now, much more publicity. But when I was first looking for a counselor, I had Kaiser coverage and I went through Kaiser and my first try was a failure. I didn't like the woman at all. Her name was Dr. Wolf and I call her ever since then, the Wolf. And then, but you know, I was going through what I had coverage for. Then, and this has helped me with 2 of the 3 long-term counselors I've had. I got recommendations from friends or family. And some really close friends of mine had this wonderful counselor who I saw in Berkeley. And after that, my sister, I don't know if she continues to, but my sister in Berkeley has continued to see her as a support system because she bore the brunt of dealing with my brother. And so that was recommendations from friends. And another once when I had a counselor in Hawaii, my mother had heard of her and she worked at a school that had a school psychologist and worked with special needs kids, a special school. And so that was through my mother's recommendation, probably from one of her friends. But then the last time when I saw a counselor for, I think like 5 years, it was like having your own special women's group of 2 almost. I mean, first it's a counselor, but I just went through Kaiser and I think she was the first one I saw. And she just was really good. So I guess partly you have to look at what kind of coverage you have and what you can afford, and then recommendations from people whose advice you value. I know there's much better care today, partly because the Affordable Care Act, mental health has to be treated as equal to physical health.
Thank you. It's very challenging for so many people to find the right counselor. So you were lucky you found somebody that you connected with. Ingrid, thank you for your generosity. Your so many lessons in your story for family members.
Bravery.
Yes. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a final speaker, before I introduce him, it's William Elting. He's a board member for NAMI San Mateo County Board, and I've been talking a lot about how with volunteer boards, there are people that do a lot, and there are sometimes people that they just don't do enough. Well, this is a guy that really does a lot. He's our treasurer. He's heading up our advocacy effort. He brings an amazing amount of energy and passion to the work of NAMI San Mateo County. And he just won a county award. Because I was up until 1:15 last night, I'm going to forget the name of the award. I want to say Tony, somebody help me. Tony
Hoffman.
Hoffman. I was going to guess, but I was sure that was wrong. He won a very prestigious, because I'm new to this area of advocacy for in the world of mental illness. I'm not very familiar with this award, but everybody else knows about it. It's a very prestigious San Mateo County award. And some of our members heard him speak when he got his award, and they said, Carrie, you have to have him close the meeting. So thank you, William, for being willing to share what you shared that night when you won your very prestigious award.
Well, thanks for the introduction. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much, Ingrid. It was really great hearing your story. And, you may have noticed I almost fell off my chair when you said happy in high school, because we don't hear that very much in the client community. So a little different than some of our experiences. So when I spoke at this other meeting earlier this month, I decided to kind of talk about my journey through this community that I've been working and volunteering in for the past 4 years, almost 4 years, and the path that I took and the people I came across and the organizations that I worked for. And yeah, apparently somebody thought it would be a good idea for me to talk about that again tonight. So we will test that theory. What happened was I was speaking at a meeting where there were about 75 men there. And I was talking very candidly about suicide, which I'm known to do. And I was just shocked that when all was said and done, probably a third of the men in that room had approached me privately after that and told me that they had had anything from suicidal ideation to suicidal attempts to being hospitalized for suicide. And I was just, I never guessed that. I never thought that I would run into so many people who felt that way. And, since then I've learned that many more people than you ever would think did. Well, for one of the few times in my life, I intuitively knew what I had to do. And the next day I was looking for ways to get involved in suicide prevention. And I went online and I found an organization called Star Vista that runs a suicide hotline. And I reached out to them, and I was very fortunate that a training was starting, and a couple of people there, Karina Chapa and Islam Hassanain, the volunteer coordinator and the clinician at the time, were just so gracious and welcoming to me. I wasn't as involved at that point in time or as gregarious as I am now, but they took me in and they worked with me, and they were happy to have me, and they got me trained, and I went on the line. And now I look back and I say, how did I ever do that? But I did, and I probably have done 1,000 hours on the suicide hotline at this point. While I was there, I took a training to help me with suicide evaluations and such, and I ran into some people from the county, and they told me about something called Mental Health Month, the same one that you see in the background here. And I found out that they were having meetings to plan Mental Health Month. And I went there, and the person who ran at the time, Natalie Andrade and Sylvia Tang from the Office of Equity and Diversity, which is in the county's Behavioral Health and Recovery Services Department, again, were just so welcoming to me. I didn't have much to offer this committee, but they brought me in, they let me come to the meetings. I was able to participate in a few events and do some things in a very, minor way, but they were glad to have that. And they invited me to come back the next year, and it was just wonderful. While I was at the Mental Health Month meetings, I was asking, I kind of was listening around to see, well, how do they find people who speak at these? How do they connect them? And I ran into a guy named John Butler, and he told me, well, the county has something called the Lived Experience Academy. And the Lived Experience Academy is basically a speakers bureau. It's run out of the office, the OFCA, which is another subset of BHRS, the Office of Family and Consumer Affairs. And it is just that. It's a speakers bureau for people in the county, clients who want to learn how to tell their stories and get connected to places where they can tell their stories. And I signed up for Lived Experience Academy and went through that and ended up getting, talking at a few events. When I was at one of those events, Bevan Love from Heart and Soul saw me. And I don't know, I guess she decided she wanted to poach me. So she grabbed me and told me, you can come and speak for me too. I run a program called Seeing Through Stigma. Seeing Through Stigma is a really good program. We go out to a number of places and, really focus on that subject of how mental health stigma has affected our lives and affects the lives of other people. And, I would say other than suicide prevention, it's speaking against stigma is really one of my passions. While I was doing all this, I was also going into the Cordillera Center once a month for almost 2 years to talk to the patients there. And, I was getting, you get to know people when you do that, and their conditions there were so bad. I just felt so bad for those people. But, they looked forward to seeing me every month, and I looked forward to seeing them. And then I saw online somewhere that this organization called NAMI, I'd never heard of it, was having an event at Mills Hospital to have the movers and shakers in the counties come out and talk about a redesign of the Cordillera Center. I don't want to say anything too bad about it, but I mean, it started out as one of those places where they sent people with tuberculosis. And it looked very much like the place in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest last time I was there a year ago, not 30 years ago. And so it's really great that it's being rebuilt and that they had this great design. But, this was the first time that I had an experience with NAMI, was going to this general meeting and hearing about Cordilleras. But at that meeting, they also started talking about some other things that were going on, including some cuts they were planning to make at County General Hospital, including in 3AB, which is the psych unit and the psych beds. And that got me all worked up enough to show up at a Board of Supervisors meeting where, as I was sitting there swearing under my breath and shaking my fist, a guy named Michael Lim found me. And he said, you look like you feel about this the same way I do. Let me tell you more about this organization. And he got me to start going to Connections Group and getting connected with NAMI. And that's how I originally got started there. And a few months later, I was contacted by Carol Gosho about becoming a board member. And all that happened during COVID. So I was really happy about it. That's kind of the path that I took. But, all these things that I talked about, it wasn't a linear path. It was more of an accumulation, because I still do all of these things now, and in less moderation than before. And I think that that's really the most important thing that I wanted to talk about tonight, is the reason why I continue to do them. We're in an environment where the need for these types of services so outweighs the supply. It's beyond belief. Even people with insurance and money and everything else are waiting weeks for appointments, can't get the help that they need, are limited by their insurance, can't get as many sessions, as many groups, whatever it is that they need. These organizations are helping people for free. They're not charging anybody for the kinds of services, at least the ones I provide, although some other departments in them may. And we're really helping people. We're touching people's hearts. We're touching people's heads. We're keeping people from bad things from happening. And it just, I help myself by helping others. And I just can't express how much it moves me. Star Vista is an incredible organization. Probably most of you on the call have never heard of them, but they run the Sobering Station. They run the Pride Center, which is just wonderful. I've gotten so much great feedback from people I've referred to the Pride Center. They run Your House South, which is a safe house for kids. They have a counseling program. They do mandatory offender programs, and they run the Crisis Center, which is where I volunteer. Part of the Crisis Center is the suicide hotline. And right now, Zena Andrini and Brooke Pollard is the clinician there. And I work with them as, they supervise the line, but there's other stuff going on in there too. The teen chat line is run out of there, and the school intervention program. Of course, we haven't seen much this year with the schools being closed, but one of the things we were doing on the crisis line was dispatching clinicians out to schools to deal with kids as young as 8 years old who were thinking about killing themselves, engaging in self-harm, engaging in suicidal type behaviors. And, these clinicians are going out there, they're dealing with these situations face-to-face, one-on-one, and resolving them. A lot of times, there's a lot that needs to be done there. There's a lot going on with the families, and this becomes the gateway for them to get involved. It's just an incredible service. Mental Health Month, it's now Sylvia and Christy Liu who run it again through the OED, but it's bigger than ever now. They managed to make the conversion to digital, to have more events, to have more well-attended events. It's been able to become more inclusive. And I'm really impressed by the scope of the events because, I've talked at events for Mental Health Month that are spiritual and ones that are about advocacy. And as I've learned, those are polar opposites of the pole, so it's those two things and everything in between. And, this is actually, I think, the 5th time I've talked this month in Mental Health Month, but it's really taken off and it's really doing great things and involving a lot of people and a lot of talk about wellness, which is an extremely important thing. I still do the Lived Experience Academy. Hyra Wilches and Lee Harrison run it. I've had some really amazing opportunities. I got to talk to the interns, the ones who are going to be moving into clinical type positions and eventually, but are now putting in their hours working for or interning for the county. I was on the San Mateo website, still not sure how that happened, but that's okay. I talked about mental health and aging one time, and that was very interesting. And I did something called the Human Library, where, basically you sit down and talk to people one-on-one about your experience and the way that a book would. And there was a room full of people with a variety of different experiences who sat there and talked to each other face to face. Believe it or not, in February of 2020, now thinking about that now, I can't even believe it. Seeing Through Stigma, I still speak for them, and it was just absolutely amazing, some of the things that I've gotten to do. They're part of Heart and Soul. I think I said that. Heart and Soul is another wonderful organization offering a lot of services, a phone line, a gathering place, and Seeing Through Stigma. I've gotten to talk to many client groups and gone into several houses and shelters and other places, but I've also gotten the opportunity for them to talk to nurses and police officers and others, nursing students who, don't get to hear the message straight from the people who've had the experiences that often. And so it's powerful for them and powerful for me. And I always tell Bevan, if nobody cried, I didn't do my job. And pretty much every time somebody's cried. That brings me to NAMI San Mateo. Like Carrie said, I'm a board member there. And I work there with Twyla. Michael and Carol are still there, so doing various things. We have programs for peers. Peer-to-peer is a great program. It recognizes that there's no cure. We're not going to get better overnight. This is like anything else. You have to manage it. You're going to have your ups and downs. You need a community. You need things like a RAP plan. And, there's ways to insulate yourself for the lows and to buffer the highs and to kind of smooth things out. And peer-to-peer is a great way to do that. We have a warm line there. I used to just take the calls. Now I'm kind of doing the training and development on it also. And, our warm line, we've been able to expand the hours. We're 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. We give a lot of referrals. We talk to a lot of people about various issues and try to help them find services within the county. I tend to know a lot about them, having, pretty much either volunteered or talked or been in it just about every place. Connections on the peer side is probably our greatest success. We run peer-run support groups, and we're doing them online. And not only have they not withered online, they've gone from one a week that was about 8 to 10 people to 2 or 3 a week that are 10 to 15 people each. Not having to attend and get in a car and find a parking space and drive somewhere was clearly a barrier to many people attending these. And we now have these highly functional support groups for people who really need to make contact and to have these connections. And I'm just so proud of Connections and how well it works. I've taken NAMI's Family and Peer Support Training Specialist course. I think peer workers are a big part of the future of the change in mental health as we move more to the recovery model, which looks at people as a whole. There's no sense getting somebody on medication and drying them out if they're going to go right back into the same environment. We've got to look at somebody's housing, their spiritual life, their community, and all those things in order to be, in order to be able to get them well in a bigger way. And we have a Peer Pals program, which allows, people who are doing well in their recovery to partner with people who are new to it or not doing so well. It's a great thing. But, I saved the best for last in terms of NAMI, which is what we do for families. There's a lot of organizations that are big on the client stuff. But NAMI was founded by family members over 40 years ago. And it's still the primary resource for family members of people with mental health challenges in the county. You know, in addition to the family-to-family program that we have, which is similar to peer-to-peer and allows people to be trained in the skill sets of being a family member and connects them to the other people who are having the same experiences. We also have some amazing support groups. I've heard wonderful things about them. I don't go, I'm a client, not a family member, but you know, I think that you actually have, some of them actually fill up and you have to get a spot in advance. And it's just amazing. And again, they've made the transition to online. And the community, you know, it is NAMI San Mateo is the community for family members of people with mental health challenges in this community. And, you know, it's where you'll find the people with similar experiences. It's where you'll find the people who not necessarily have that silver bullet or that great answer, because more often than not, it doesn't exist. We're in an environment where we're looking for best possible for, you know, what's the experience? How can I do the best I can type of thing. And the people who know that because they've experienced it, they've worked it, they've lived it day after day, that's where you'll find them, is in NAMI San Mateo. I tell you all that to tell you this, you know, here we are bringing all of this for free, but you know, nothing in life can be done for free. So I really implore you, join NAMI San Mateo. We have many options for membership. Joining us helps us financially a little bit, but it also helps enhance our voice. The more members we have, the more we can do in the advocacy arena, the more weight we carry, the more people we have talking to each other and making community, you know, or make donations. We have ways to make donations on the website, but you know, we're here, we're doing stuff. It's working well, it's filling a need. Thank you all for coming tonight.
Thank you, William. Good night, everyone. Thank you so much.